All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome once again to Local Church. Super glad that you're here. My name is Michael. It's such an honor to be here with you as always. Thank you for those of you who had to be a little bit more courageous this morning to brave the snow. Thanks for doing it. You make the community better by being here. If it's your first time here, I want to especially welcome you as well. I hope this can feel genuinely like the safest community for you to be yourself, to maybe make some friends and maybe even have some fun as well. I hope you got some coffee and some bagels and you feel safe and comfortable here. Well, anyway, Happy New Year. How's it going? Yeah? Okay. That felt forced. It felt like you felt like you had to. That's okay. That's okay. So we're 4 days in. 4 days in. For those of you who have made resolutions or goals this year, how you doing so far? Thumbs up if you're doing okay. Maybe thumb to the side if it's like, it could be a little better. Thank you for your honesty. All right, cool. Well, regardless of where you're at or how it's gone so far, I want you to know that I hope genuinely that this is your year. I hope that this could be the year that everything you want to accomplish will get accomplished. Even if you haven't made any resolutions or goals, whatever's in your heart that you may not even know how to articulate yet, I hope it happens for you this year, no matter what it might be. It could be, maybe you have some financial resolutions, maybe it's some fitness things, maybe you have some spiritual goals or relational goals or career stuff, whatever it is, I got your back. I'm here to support you the best way that I can. And because of that, I have to give you a heads up about something that you may not know about. In fact, I just learned about this just a few days ago. Have you ever heard of Quitter's Day? Have you ever heard of Quitter's Day before? Apparently this is a real thing. So Quitter's Day is the second Friday in January, and that is when most people abandon their New Year's resolutions. I just found this out. So you got 5 days. We got 5 days until Quitter's Day comes up. But apparently most people, they did a study of like 45 million people, and a majority of them abandoned their resolution by the second Friday in January. And so if you're anything like I am, this may be the reason why you don't really like New Year's resolutions. If you're anything like I am, it may be the reason why you hesitate when it comes to goals and trying to start new habits and things like that, because you might have tried in the past and yet you fell victim to Quitter's Day. Or if it wasn't Quitter's Day, it was probably February, right? February comes around and that's the second biggest time that people abandon their goals. But if you're anything like me, I've had years where I played the game. I sat down, I was really, really intentional about the goals I wanted to make, the things I wanted to do that next year, and I started the year out excited and hopeful and motivated, only to end the year still weighing more than I wanted to weigh, still in more debt than I wanted to be in, still not doing the spiritual habits that I wanted to implement, and still not praying as much as I wanted to, or reading as much of the Bible as I wanted to, or going to church as much as I wanted to, whatever. So, for me, sometimes when I think about goals, when I think about resolutions, when I think about the new year even, it can be kind of discouraging. It's a reminder of like all the times in the past when I wasn't able to do what I really wanted to do. And this is why I want to start the year out kind of talking a little bit about how we could maybe set ourselves up to best avoid Quitter's Day this year. How we can maybe set ourselves up to actually really accomplish the things that we want to accomplish, to make the changes that we really want or maybe even need to make this year. So this series is for you if you really want to change. Or it's for you if you hope to change, or you've tried to change and didn't quite work out, or you just wonder, is it even possible? Is it even possible? Am I just broken? And will I never be able to change? This is a series for you. And I hope that by the time we're done with this conversation over the next 5 weeks, you will feel really inspired and encouraged and even equipped, like practically equipped with how to make the lasting changes that you want to make, changes that will really stick. And to do this, we're going to get a little bit of help from somebody who's been really influential to me, Pastor Craig Groeschel. He wrote this book called The Power to Change. And this pastor, I've never met him before, but I listened to his podcast and I read a lot of his books, and he has helped me so much, not just in terms of my own spiritual faith, but also in terms of leadership as well. And so I know that a lot of the content that we'll talk about in this series will be helpful to you as well. All right, so if you've ever set resolutions and you're anything like me, you set them, you made the goals, and then you failed, you may have asked yourself this question, like I've asked myself over and over again, what the heck is wrong with me? What's wrong with me? Why can't I did everything right? Like I bought all the new workout clothes and a cool bottle, to bring my water to the gym with me. Like I bought the daily planner. I bought I bought the productivity app to help me stay on focus, to stay on task, to manage my time better. I even made a budget this year, and everything went well for a little bit of time, and then all of a sudden it fell apart. All of a sudden it didn't last. If you're anything like I am, you've ever asked this question before, what the heck is wrong with me? I want you to know, first of all, you're normal and you're not alone. You're normal and you're not alone. I mean, again, just judging on the fact that we have a day called Quitter's Day should make you feel like, all right, it's not just me, right? Like everybody experiences this. And I want you to know that even super spiritual people experience this as well. Like some of the most spiritual people, what you might even say, like some of the people who just had like the closest relationship to God that you could have suffered from not being able to accomplish the goals that they want to accomplish. In fact, the Apostle Paul is someone who was who's responsible for writing over 50% of the New Testament, or the second big part of the Bible. It's like the Jesus part of the Bible. Paul wrote like 50% of that. So yeah, he was really, really close to God, really, really spiritual. And yet, he said this about himself. In one of the letters that he wrote to the first century church in Rome, chapter 7, he says this, I don't really understand myself. And we can kind of just stop there for a second. Can anybody relate to that? You ever look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, I don't get you. I just don't get you at all. Paul's like, I've been there. I don't really understand myself. For I want to do what is right, but I don't do it. See, Paul's like, I know what I'm supposed to do. I know what the good thing to do is. And yet, there's something in me that's preventing me from actually doing it, from actually making the change that I want to make, to actually accomplishing the goal that I want to accomplish. And then he goes on to say, and in addition to this, I don't want to do what is wrong. I know what I should stop doing. I know the habits that I should break. I know where I shouldn't go. I know the things that I shouldn't say. I don't want to do what is wrong, but you know what happens? I do it anyway. But I go ahead and do it anyway, even though I know it's going to be bad for me, even though I know it's going to be bad for my friends, it's going to be bad for my family, yet I still do it. Oh, he goes on to say, oh, what a miserable person I am. Can you relate to that at all? Can you relate to like knowing what you're supposed to do, wanting to do that thing, and yet for some reason you just don't do it. And now, on top of the fact that you didn't accomplish what you want to accomplish, you have to wrestle with the guilt of that, the frustration of that, the question of what the heck is wrong with me? Why can't I succeed in this? I've been there many times, and if you've been there, you're not alone. Here's something that I've learned. Here's something that I want to kind of point out that is true when it comes to setting goals that I've experienced. That many people, including me, have the right intentions, but they use the wrong strategy. Many people, especially at a time like now, the year's starting out, they think about what's ahead, they have the right intentions. They know what they want to do. They know what's good for them to do. They know what they need to stop doing. And they want to do those things. They want to do these, they want to stop doing these things, and they try to change. But the problem is, the strategy is off. They try to do it the wrong way. And I think it's because most of the time, they start with the wrong questions. Most of the time, we start with natural questions, but not the most helpful questions. Again, if you're anything like I am, when you want to make a change, you may start by asking yourself, okay, well, what can I do? What can I do to change? What can I do to make this right? And this is super intuitive. It's practical. It's understandable. It's natural for us to ask these kind of questions. But I don't think that this question is the best question to start with. Eventually we can get there, but I don't think it's the best question to start with. And I don't think the Apostle Paul thought it was the best question to start with either. Because as he was wrestling with this side of humanity where he knows what should be done, but he's not able to do it, instead of asking the question, well, what can I do to change this? What do I have to do differently to make sure that this isn't a problem in the future? Instead of asking that question, he asks a different question. What I think is a much more helpful question. Instead of asking, what can I do? He asks the question, who? Who will free me from this life that is dominated by sin and death? While so many people want to start with what can I do to change the situation? Paul started with who can help me? Who can guide me? Who can free me from this life that is dominated by sin and death? Now, if you're not a church person or a God person, maybe you're just kind of checking this all out for the first time or the first time in a long time, this may sound a little dramatic. Like, really? Free me from sin and death, And I get that. And I'll tell you why. It's because the word sin in our context, in our culture these days, is like strictly religious. You probably don't hear that word pretty much anywhere else outside of church. But when Paul was using this word, this was a very common word. It was an everyday word. In fact, it was an athletic term. It was an archery term. Sin just means to miss the mark. So if you were to shoot at a target, literally if you hit anything but the bullseye, you sinned. You missed the mark. You fell short of the standard that you were hoping to hit. And so when Paul says, who's going to free me from this life that's dominated by sin? He's saying, who's going to free me from this life that's dominated by my inability to hit the mark, by my inability to actually reach the goals that I want to reach, to actually do what I know I need to do, to actually stop doing what I know I need to stop doing. And by the way, did you know that you can actually sin against yourself? Like, I can sin against myself. So if I set a standard up myself, like for instance, if I decide this year, I want to be fit. I want to be physically fit. If I sit on the couch all day, every day, and just eat cheeseburgers and do nothing and don't ever move my body, I'm sinning against myself. I'm falling short of my own standard. And you know what happens as a result? Death. Not always physical death, but the death of something. As a result of sitting on the couch all year long and just eating cheeseburgers, my abs are going to die. My rock-hard biceps are going to die. That's what you think of when you think of me, right? Rock hard biceps. No, but no, that will happen. All of a sudden, like, I am not going to. My desire, my dream to actually be a fit person is going to die if I don't have the ability to do what I need to do to make it happen. And this is what the Apostle Paul is saying. Who's going to free me from this inability to actually do what I need to do? From my inability to actually hit the target? From this thing in me that keeps me from the standard that I even put in place myself. Now, if you are a follower of Jesus, you can take this to another level. And I think the Apostle Paul was doing that as well when he was talking about this. Because we don't just set our own standards, but as followers of Jesus, we also try to follow the standard of God. And so for Paul and for anybody who calls themselves a follower of Jesus, God set some pretty high standards for us. I mean, if you are a follower of Jesus, one of the things that Jesus asks his followers to do is forgive. Oh, that's hard. Especially forgiving people who really don't deserve it, right? The people in our life who we really don't like. Jesus would say, it's okay. I want you to forgive them anyway. That's tough. You know what else he would say? I want you to love everybody the way I've loved you, even the people who hate you, even the people who would never love you back. You're supposed to love them. That's a really hard standard to hit. And so Paul is like, who's going to free me from this life that's dominated by my inability to reach these standards, to hit that mark? And then the death that follows. And so he goes on to answer his own question. Who will free me? I'll tell you who. Thank God. The answer is in Jesus Christ, our Lord. The answer is in Jesus Christ, our Lord. So again, if you're not really a God person, not really a church person, this may sound a little hocus pocusy, like Jesus is the answer to everything. We just like say his name and all of a sudden we're all good, I understand that. But I want you to know that the Apostle Paul could understand that kind of thinking as well. Because there was a time when the Apostle Paul was actually very anti-Jesus. Very anti-Jesus. Like, he steps onto the pages of history when you read about his story as a person who hated Jesus and hated anybody who claimed to follow Jesus. Like, so much so that he literally made it his life mission to hunt Christians down, arrest them, and then he approved of their death. Like, that's how, if you hate Christians, like Paul hated them even more. He hated them so much. And then something happened. Then Paul saw something that forever changed his life, that made him do a complete 180. Literally, on his way to go persecute some more Christians, because that's how much he hated Jesus, he saw Jesus, which may not sound all that crazy until you realize that Jesus had died. Jesus was literally crucified by professional killers. Jesus was crucified by Rome. And yet, somehow, Paul saw him, had an encounter with a resurrected Jesus. And because of that, it changed everything for him. Literally, all of a sudden, he went from being a Christian hater to like one of the most famous Christians, one of the most famous Jesus followers, all because he saw Jesus after Jesus came back to life. And just like you and just like me, Paul never knew anybody who could actually defeat death. Paul never knew anybody who could actually pull off their own death and resurrection. And so, because of that, Paul concluded that if this man who predicted his own death and resurrection and pulled it off was able to do that, then surely he is who he says he is. And Jesus claimed to be God in a bod. Jesus claimed to be God in a body. And he claimed to be able to offer things like the forgiveness of sins. Jesus claimed to be able to offer freedom from sin and the hold that it can have on us. Freedom from this side of us that keeps us back, that keeps us from doing what we know we should do, that keeps us from stopping what we know we should stop. And so for Paul, he became convinced that this man who was able to defeat death, who was not held back by sin himself, is the answer to the question, who will free me? Who will free me? Well, the person who's not chained himself, the person who's got away from all of that. And I think Paul would say that if you are looking for a higher power, if you are looking for more in life, if you are looking for a bigger purpose, if you are looking for guidance and help, even with just your simple goals, which might be, I just want to lose some weight. I want to save some more money this year. I want to pray more. I want to make church more of a priority, whatever it might be. I think the Apostle Paul would say, if you are looking for any of that, there are really good reasons for you to look to Jesus. Really good reasons. One of them being, this is a man who predicted his own death and resurrection and then actually pulled it off. But another one being that this man, Jesus, has been changing people's lives for 2,000 years. And he hasn't even been around physically to do it. Like, he's been changing people's lives for thousands and thousands of years. And not just their spiritual lives, but he's been helping people's lives get better in every aspect for thousands of years. And I know this from personal experience, and I know this from many of your stories as well. And I want to share, with the rest of our time together, I want to share 2 practical reasons for why this is. Why following Jesus can really help your life get better and help you get better at life, but also why following Jesus helps you accomplish the goals that you want to accomplish. And it helps you make the changes that you want to make, even changes that you couldn't previously make. And my hope is that as we kind of discover these things together, we'll be able to implement them. Even today, we'll be able to implement this and then accomplish what we want to accomplish. So when you follow Jesus, when Jesus becomes the answer to your question, who is going to help me with this? Who can free me from this? Who can help me make the changes I want to make? When Jesus becomes the answer there, you immediately get equipped with what I like to call 2 power tools. You get 2 power. Previously, you were working with like a screwdriver, like a stapler. And now you get these like massive plug-in power tools when you start following Jesus. And they're these. The first one is a spiritual why, and the second one is a spiritual how. You get a spiritual why and a spiritual how. Because when we're setting goals, when we're making resolutions, when we just want to quit something or start something, but maybe don't have quite the motivation to do so, we all have a reason why we want to do those things. We all have a natural why. So if your thing this year is I want to lose some weight, you might have a lot of good reasons why. Maybe one of them is I want to be able to look good at the beach, this summer. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a natural why. And then you might have a natural how. How am I going to accomplish this? What am I going to do to make this happen? And so, I don't know, there's many ways. Maybe for you, it's you're ordering a shake weight, and you're going to be shaking that weight, all week long. That's how you're going to lose weight. I don't know. Maybe for you, it's I'm just going to be drinking Slim Fast all day, every day. I'm going to try to do a sit-up, whatever it might be. Those are natural hows, natural ways for you to actually accomplish that goal. But when you and I start to follow Jesus, when we start to look to Jesus as the person that can help us with these things, that can free us from a life dominated by sin and death, our why and our how gets so much more powerful, and it gets so much more reinforced because God joins the party. We're not in it on our own anymore. And all of a sudden, we've got God with us. And so now we have a spiritual why, which is God's purpose for you. Not just your own purpose for you, but now you have God's purpose for you. And then you get a spiritual how, which is now God's power through you, which means that you and I don't have to rely on our own willpower. We don't have to rely on our own strength to make these changes. Instead, we've got God with us, working through us, which, again, if you've never experienced this before, it might sound crazy, it might sound impossible, it might sound strange, it might sound unbelievable or weird, and I get that. But when you have experienced this, you know how amazing it is. You know how incredible it is because you remember what it was like when you tried to do it yourself and you couldn't. And so I think that Jesus demonstrated this really well for us. And he demonstrated just how powerful a spiritual why can be. Because did you know that Jesus had his own goals? One of Jesus' goals was to literally die for the sins of the world. That's one of the reasons why he showed up in the first place, to die for the sins of the world. Imagine if that were your goal. That would be a hard goal to stick with, right? That'd be a tough resolution. It's like, hey, this year you have to die for people, not just the people that you like. You got to die for the people that you don't like. You got to die for the people who hate you. That would be, you know what? That would be one that I'd want to abandon on Quitter's Day. I'm fine with that. And guess what? Jesus wanted to give up too. Jesus wanted to leave that behind as well. And we know this because right before he was arrested and hauled off to his death, in his humanity, because Jesus was fully God and fully man, in his humanity, he prayed a prayer that was recorded for us by Luke, who thoroughly investigated the life of Jesus and wrote all it down. He wrote down Jesus' prayer for us. And so in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus is praying to God the Father, and he says this, Father, if you are willing, please take this cup of suffering away from me. In other words, I don't want to do this. Like, I know what's ahead of me. I know that in just a few moments, a bunch of guards are going to come, led by the religious leaders. They're going to put me in handcuffs. They're going to take me away, and then they're going to torture me. They're going to punch me. They're going to beat me. They're going to spit on me. They're going to whip me in the back until I'm unrecognizable. They're going to push a crown of thorns over my head. They're going to pull out my beard. And when I'm just about on the brink of death, they're going to nail me to a cross. And I'm going to suffocate and die, and they're going to stick me with a spear. He knew everything that was about to happen to him and how horrifying it was going to be and how painful it was going to be. And so, understandably so, he asked God, can I give up on this one? Can we leave this one behind? Anybody here go to the gym for the first time in a long time this year, or start working out for the first time in a long time? It's like you're determined this year to get healthy. And then when you're on that treadmill, you're like, God, please take this cup of suffering away. It burns, right? Like if you ever had that experience, like, oh God, this is so hard. Jesus knows what that feels like. Jesus can relate to that experience. He had his own version of this. He wanted to quit. But listen to what he says next. Listen to what he says next. Father, if you're willing, please take this cup of suffering away from me. I don't want to do this anymore. Yet, I want your will to be done, not mine. In other words, Jesus had more than just his own natural reasons for doing what he was doing. He had a spiritual reason too. He had a purpose given to him by God. And that gave him the strength, the motivation, the discipline to keep going, even when where he was going was his own death. And here's why I think this is so genius. Because isn't it true that sometimes it's easier to get uncomfortable for the sake of someone else than for your own sake? I don't know if you've ever experienced that before, but sometimes it's easier to put yourself in uncomfortable positions if you're doing it for somebody else, but you would never do that for yourself, right? So every single Monday's mine and Emily's day off, and we go indoor rock climbing every Monday. It's just our thing. We've been doing it for over a year. We love it so much, climbing 40-foot walls, and we have a great group of people that we go climbing with. But I will tell you, some days on my day off, I don't want to go. To be honest with you, there are some days where I'd rather just sit on the couch, do something mindless, and relax. Yet, I almost always go, even when I have those really tempting moments of wanting to stay home. But I don't go for me. Even though intellectually I know, like once I get there, once I start climbing, I'm going to feel great. I'm going to love it. I'm going to have the time of my life. I know that intellectually, but I rarely ever go for my own sake. I always go in those moments for my friends. I go for the people who are waiting for me, who are relying on me because we have to belay each other. Because sometimes it's easier to kind of put yourself out of your comfort zone for the sake of someone else than yourself. And in the same way, when our why, when our reasons for losing weight, saving money, doing whatever it is that we want to do, when our reasons for changing don't quite motivate us, they're not quite strong enough to get us there, this is where Jesus steps in and gives us a spiritual why. He gives us God's purpose for doing this, which it reinforces, sometimes takes over, and becomes our motivation, our new motivation to keep on going. It gives us more reasons to say no to Quitter's Day and no to giving up. But following Jesus doesn't just give us a spiritual why, it also gives us the spiritual how, which is so cool. God's power through you. And I know, again, it sounds kind of crazy until you just really try it and you experience it for yourself. It's incredible. And I think the Apostle Paul has a fascinating story of God's power through him. He demonstrates this so well for us. You see, Paul started out living a life of luxury. This guy, before he was a Christian, he was a religious leader who was like one of the best of the best. He probably made more money than most. He had more power than most, more influence than others did, and he was living high. And then he became a Jesus follower, and everything changed for him. His friends didn't like him anymore. People were after him. He had to go from a life of luxury to a life of poverty, hardship, imprisonment, persecution, torture of his own, all because of his decision to follow Jesus. And yet, as he's experiencing these extremely difficult sides of life, what he calls a thorn in my side, as he's experiencing these things, here's what he says about God. He says each time, referring to this thorn in his side, whatever that might be, it could be a whole bunch of things. It could be one thing. It doesn't matter. But each time he experienced this really challenging aspect of life, he said, God spoke to me. God said something to me in the midst of all that. God said to me, my grace. Grace just means unmerited favor, unconditional love. So God's saying, my relationship with you, my love for you, the fact that I am with you is all you need. It's all you need, Paul, when you're experiencing all these difficult moments in life, when you're experiencing these times in your life where you know you want to change, but you can't. My grace is all you need because my power, it's like power, and my power works best in weakness. My power works best in weakness. And Paul experienced this enough to know, or experienced this enough to eventually say, so now I am glad to boast about my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ can work through me. Paul got to the point where he's like, those moments where I feel miserable because I can't stop the things I know I need to stop have actually become moments of gladness because I'm like, oh, here's a weakness now that I can invite God into and that I can watch his power work through me in. Imagine if you could actually live like this. Imagine if we could live like this, like with complete confidence that our weaknesses could actually be turned into a strength. Imagine if you never had to second guess whether or not you could truly change. Imagine if you were like, okay, this year, here's the things that I want to change, and you had complete confidence, it can easily be done. It can happen because God's with me, because God's power can work through me. This is how the Apostle Paul lived. Not always, but he got to the point where this was his life, believing that real change could actually happen because of God. And for those of you who have any experience with recovery, maybe personally or someone or some people in your life who've gone through like a 12-step program, you've probably seen this in action. You've watched this happen in real time. Because the first two steps of recovery are simply to admit that you have a problem, and the second one is to surrender to a higher power. The first step is to admit, I've got a weakness here. There's something I know I need to do. I want to do it. I can't do it though. It's a weakness. It's a problem. There's something I know I need to stop doing. I want to stop it. I can't though. It won't stop. You admit you have a problem. And then once you're honest about the fact that this is an issue, you surrender that to a higher power. You submit it to a higher power. Why? So that higher power can give you what you don't have to solve that problem. So that higher power can give you the strength, can give you the discipline, can work through you, so that the higher power's power can work through you to solve that problem. Millions and millions of people have been set free using this method. You probably know some of them. You might be one of them. Millions of people have been set free. But let me let you in on a little secret. That's really cool. This doesn't just work for addiction. This doesn't just work for addiction. It works for everything. Did you know that? If you've got a problem with fitness, with health, if you've got a problem with time management, with relationships, with spiritual disciplines, if you've got a problem with money management, whatever problems you might be facing that you would like to solve, that you would like to change, and maybe you haven't even set a goal or made a resolution because you just feel like change is impossible, if you have any kind of problem like that that needs to be tweaked and solved, did you know you can actually bring that to God? You can admit this is an issue. I am not able to do it on my own, and then surrender it and submit it to your Father in heaven. Because every problem you want to solve, and every change that you want to make is an opportunity to ask God for help. Is an opportunity to ask God, would you work through this weakness? Would you send your power to show up in my weakness? And maybe, perhaps this is the single shift that you need to make, that I need to make this year, as we consider our goals, as we consider our resolutions, as we consider the goals and resolutions that we were afraid to make because we were afraid that change is impossible. Maybe this is the single change that we need to make. To remember that God is actually with us and can work through us. That instead of tackling these things on our own, we can invite God into it. And not just embrace our own reasons for why and our own methods for how, but to embrace God's why and his how. I have seen this work over and over again in many people's lives. I've seen it work in mine many times as well. I used to hate reading. Up until like 2016, the only books I really read were the Bible and like the Harry Potter series. I was like, that was it. That was the only books that I elected to read. And then in 2016, I became like a band leader for a church in the Midwest. And I realized pretty quickly that I was a pretty good musician, but a pretty terrible leader. Like, I had a big team of people to lead, and I was not cut out for it. And I realized that I had basically two options. I could just quit and go back to singing like James Taylor covers on a cruise ship, because that's what I did, for a long time. It was easy. I was by myself and had everybody else to work with. I could do that, or I could try to get better. I could try to grow as a leader. And then I came across this verse, something else that was written by the Apostle Paul, where he said this. He said, if God has given you leadership ability, you know what you need to do? Take that responsibility seriously. If God has given you leadership ability, take the responsibility seriously. That's how I realized if I want to remain in this leadership position and honor God, I need to take it seriously. I need to take this seriously. And so I set a goal to start reading more books, because I learned that leaders are readers, and that your leadership situations do not get easier. You just have to get better. And the best way to get better is to read. It's to grow. It's to learn from others who have been there before. And so even though I despised reading, I despised it, I hated it, I love God more than I despise reading. And I wanted to honor God with my leadership, with the leadership responsibility that he gave me. And so I started to read. And guess what? Eventually, I fell in love with it. And over the last 10 years, I've read hundreds of books. There's no exaggeration. Hundreds of books on leadership and theology and others. And honestly, I tell you this story because you never know, like what the start of one small habit, you never know what that could lead to. Because I honestly don't think that this church would exist if it wasn't for that habit. If it wasn't for that goal. Because this church got started 4 years ago. I don't think it would have, though, because most of the inspiration and the motivation and the know-how to get it done came from the books that me and Emily read. But I never would have started doing it, because I despise reading. I never would have started doing it if it wasn't for a stronger why than my own why. If it wasn't for my spiritual why. For God's purpose for me. And if it wasn't for my spiritual how. For God's power through me. That verse, you got to take leadership seriously if God's giving you that. That became my spiritual why. And it became my motivation to I gotta grow. I gotta grow. I gotta read. I gotta get uncomfortable if I'm gonna grow. So I'm gonna read. That's what caused me to take leadership seriously, which eventually helped start this church. And I've seen this kind of thing happen over and over and over again with so many other things as well. So if you have ever wondered, like I've wondered, what is wrong with me? What is wrong with me? I know what I need to do. I know what I need to stop doing. I just can't seem to do it. Then maybe your problem isn't your intentions. Maybe your problem isn't your motivation. Maybe it's a strategy thing. Maybe your next step is to, instead of asking the question, what can I do? It's to ask the question, who? Who can free me? Who can save me? Who can help me with this? And if your answer is Jesus, if you come to the same conclusion that the Apostle Paul came to, if you come to the same conclusion that so many around you, so many here have come to, then maybe your next step is to discover your spiritual why, to ask yourself, what is my spiritual why? I know you have your natural why. You have your own reasons why, sure. Yeah, you might want to lose weight because you want to look good at the beach. And there's nothing wrong with that. What's your spiritual why? Maybe your spiritual why could be that your body, like your physical body, is what the Apostle Paul calls the temple of the Holy Spirit. Did you know that? Like it's in some strange way that I don't understand, yet is so magnificent and cool. God takes up residence in you and in me. Like Paul says, our body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. And I don't know about you, but I want God's house to be clean. I want God's house to look good, like it's good, to be as good as possible. So I want to take care of that. Maybe that could be your spiritual why. Maybe for you got a goal this year and you want to save some more money. And perhaps the natural reasons why are like you want to be able to go on vacation. Maybe you want to have more money for your kids' college fund, or more money for retirement, whatever it might be, just to have a little bit of margin, and all those are great reasons. But perhaps your spiritual why could be something along the lines of, well, to follow Jesus means to really accept the fact that everything I have has actually been given to me by God. Like everything I own and everything I get is a gift from God, which means it's not really mine. I just get to manage it. And if I'm going to manage it, I want to manage it well. I want to honor God with how I manage my money. Maybe that could be a motivation for you. If you have a goal to spend less time on social media, spend less time on the phone, that's great. Maybe your spiritual why could be what God asks for all of his followers, that he wants us more than anything to love each other. It's really hard to love each other well when we're just consumed with our phone. And so when I'm in a room with somebody else, when I'm sitting one-on-one, the phone goes away. Not just because I want to be on my phone less, but because I want to honor the person who's made in God's image that's in front of me right now. If you want to advance in your career, that's great. You should do the best you can to, get the promotions that you want to get more responsibility, to get a bigger paycheck. Maybe your spiritual why could be that, hey, the more I have, the more I can give. And I want to do everything I can to advance the kingdom of God on Long Island. And so I want to have as much influence as possible, as much money as possible, as much authority as possible, because I can use all those resources for God. I don't know. But whatever you've got going on in your mind, maybe even those goals or resolutions that you're afraid to speak out loud because you're just worried that you'll never be able to change. Whatever is in your heart or on your mind, I want to challenge you today to find your spiritual why. You have the natural why, that's easy. But what's God's purpose behind that change? Because that might be the one thing that's keeping you from actually following through. It's keeping you from actually accomplishing what you want to accomplish this year. Because, in my experience, lasting change, lasting real change, it starts with knowing God's purpose for you and inviting him to work through you. From knowing the spiritual why and living with God, spiritual how. So, would you discover what your spiritual why is this week? Just pick one goal and figure out what's God's reason behind this. And then, more importantly, don't miss part 2 next week of The Power to Change. Let me say a prayer with you. Well, Heavenly Father, God, I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much that you care so much about us, that you are so for us, that you present yourself as the answer to the question, who will free me? That God, you went through the lengths of showing up living a sinless life to die a sinner's death, brutal, brutal death, all to show us just how much you love us. And thank you for the hundreds of people who witnessed not just your death, but who witnessed your resurrection. And as a result, we can have confidence today that you really are who you say you are, which means we really can put our faith in you. We could put our trust in you, not just for the forgiveness of sins, but God, we could put our faith and our trust that you really can work through us, that our weaknesses don't have to be something that scares us, but instead we can be glad because we can know that this is an opportunity for you to show us grace, to show us love, and to show us your power as you change us. And so I pray, God, however this lands with each of us individually, that you would give us the wisdom to know what to do. Give us the wisdom to know what to do with what we just read, what we just talked about. And then would you give us the courage to take that step? Maybe for some of us, our first step is to just acknowledge you really are who you say you are. And we are people who are flawed. We're not perfect. And so we're going to put our trust in the fact that you gave your life for us. Maybe that's our first step. Maybe our next step is to trust that you actually care about us even beyond that initial step of looking to you and trusting you and following you. That you will work through our lives, and even in small ways. In ways that we don't really want to bother you with, and yet you are waiting just to hear from us, just for us to invite you in. So maybe we just need to invite you in to something small today. Whatever it is, God, would you give us the wisdom to know and to give us the courage to take a step in your direction. And I pray that as we are faithful to follow you, even when we stumble, even when we fall, God, you would give us the grace to keep on moving forward, keep on moving in your direction. And that story, our story of following, would inspire others and it would honor you. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Well, hey, I want to thank you so much for spending this time with us. And before you go, I would love for you to consider engaging with local church in 3 additional ways. The first is to fill out a Connect card. No matter where you are in the world, we would love for you to do this. It'll only take you about 30 seconds, and it's just an easy way for us to get to know you a bit more and to serve you better, and for you to get to know us a little better as well. Just click the link in the description to get started. The second way that you can engage with local church is by visiting us in person. If you're local and you don't regularly participate in a church community, we would love to invite you to join us every Sunday. Resources like this can do a lot for our faith personally, but Jesus teaches that God does something unique for our faith when we choose to gather corporately. Click the link in the description to plan your visit. And finally, if you've been positively impacted by local church in any way, would you consider making a tax-deductible donation? Content like this, along with everything that goes on around here, is only made possible by the generosity of people just like you. You can click the link in the description or visit localchurchli.com/give. So, once again, thank you so much. We hope that you found this content helpful and inspiring, and we're so honored to be a part of your faith journey.